The silence in space was about to be shattered forever. Above Earth's blue marble, reality itself seemed to tear open as massive shapes materialized from the void, not gradually, but all at once, like nightmare made manifest. The alien armada didn't just appear. It conquered the very sky, blotting out familiar constellations with holes that gleamed like liquid mercury under the dying light of distant stars. Admiral Kraldock stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator, his 6 eyes gleaming with the cold satisfaction of a predator who had cornered helpless prey. His bioscanners painted a pathetic picture of Earth's defenses, nuclear missiles that crawled through space. Like arthritic snails, energy shields so weak a child could punch through them with a toy blaster, and space stations that looked like they'd been assembled from scrap metal and hope. How delightfully primitive, Kraldox muttered, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. The Vorthan Empire had crushed civilizations across 3 galaxies. Earth would be just another footnote in their endless expansion. But there was something almost insulting about how easy this would be. Meanwhile, 300 miles beneath the Colorado Mountains, Lieutenant Jake Morrison was having the worst day of his young career. The 28-year-old radar operator had been tracking what he thought were atmospheric anomalies for the past hour, watching his screens flicker and dance with impossible readings. Then the impossible became undeniable. Commander Williams, Morrison's voice cracked like a teenager's as he spun in his chair.
Ow.
Sweat beading on his forehead despite the bunker's Arctic air conditioning. Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures. They're not meteors. They're not space debris. They're ships. And sir, ... He paused, his training warring with the evidence before his eyes. There are thousands of them. You know that feeling when you're watching a horror movie and the protagonist is about to open the door? You're screaming at them not to open. That's exactly how Commander Williams felt as he rushed to Morrison's station, his coffee mug forgotten, and cooling on his desk. The main display showed what looked like a constellation of malevolent stars, each one pulsing with energy signatures that made their most advanced sensors scream warnings. "Get me General Hayes," Williams commanded, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his stomach. "And patch me through to NORAD, the Pentagon, and every space tracking station on the planet. We're not alone anymore." 2 floors above, in the Secure Communications Center, General Rebecca Hayes stood frozen before the massive holographic display that dominated the war room. At 52, she'd seen combat in 3 different theaters, commanded joint operations that saved thousands of lives, and stared down international crises that would have broken lesser officers. But nothing, absolutely nothing had prepared her for this moment. The alien ships weren't just large, they were impossibly beautiful in their menace. Crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them, holes that reflected starlight in patterns that hurt to look at directly, and energy signatures that pulsed with the rhythm of something alive and hungry. They looked like the galaxy's most beautiful nightmare, and they were positioned in perfect formation above Earth's major population centers. "Ma'am," her aide whispered, "we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from all of them at once." Then the voice came. Not through speakers or communication devices, but somehow directly into the minds of every human being on Earth. Kraldock's S-words slithered through consciousness like ice water through veins, carrying with them the weight of absolute authority and crushing inevitability. "Primitive humans," the voice began, and you could almost hear the sneer in it. "Your pathetic expansion into our territories ends now. We are the Vorthan Empire, and we have watched your species crawl from your birth, world like insects discovering fire. Your weapons are toys that amuse our children. Your courage is meaningless before our power. You have one choice: submit to our rule, serve our purposes, and some of you may live to see tomorrow's sunrise. Resist and watch your species burn in the fires of our displeasure." Across the globe, humans stopped what they were doing. In Times Square, the massive digital displays flickered and died. In Moscow, the Kremlin's emergency systems activated automatically. In Tokyo, millions of people looked up at the sky and saw their own mortality reflected in alien holes. The message was clear: Humanity's brief moment in the cosmic spotlight was over before it had truly begun. But here's where the story gets interesting. I mean, really interesting. Because while humanity trembled under the shadow of annihilation, something else was stirring. Deep beneath Antarctica's endless ice sheets, in chambers carved from living rock by hands that had shaped continents, ancient systems that had slumbered for 65 million years began to detect the threat. The hibernation pods weren't just sleeping, they were waiting. Waiting for the right moment, the right threat, the right time to fulfill a promise made before the first human had ever drawn breath. Inside those pods, beings of unimaginable power and wisdom had chosen to step back from the cosmic stage, to let evolution take its course, to trust that their successors would be worthy of the protection they offered. And as Kraldok's ultimatum echoed through human minds, as governments scrambled to respond to the impossible, as children cried and adults prayed to whatever gods they believed in, those ancient guardians began to wake. The ice above their hidden cities started to crack not randomly, but in perfect geometric patterns that spoke of intelligence and purpose. Energy readings spiked beyond anything human science could measure, and the very fabric of space-time began to ripple with forgotten power. The awakening had begun, and the universe was about to discover that Earth had never been as defenseless. As it appeared, sometimes the greatest power lies not in what you can see, but in what chooses to remain hidden until the moment it's needed most. Want to discover how seemingly small, hidden forces can compound into unstoppable power over time? Check out my next video about the incredible power of compounding, where tiny actions create massive results. Just like these ancient guardians who waited millions of years for the perfect moment to act, the President of the United States had faced down foreign dictators, economic crashes, and natural disasters that claimed thousands of lives. But President Marcus Thompson had never faced a moment quite like this one. Standing in the Oval Office, surrounded by the Joint Chiefs and his top advisors, he looked out at the rose garden, where cherry blossoms bloomed in peaceful ignorance of the alien armada hovering above their heads. "Mr. President," his chief of staff whispered urgently, "the entire world is watching. Every leader on Earth is waiting to see what America says first." Thompson straightened his tie and nervous habit from his days as a trial lawyer in Detroit and stepped up to the microphone that would broadcast his words not just to humanity, but to the stars themselves. His voice, when it came, carried the weight of every human who had ever stood up to a bully, every underdog who had refused to surrender, every person who had ever chosen courage over comfort. "This is Earth," he began, his words thundering across the void with the authority of a species that had clawed its way from caves to the cosmos. "We bow to no one. We kneel to no empire. We have fought for our freedom for thousands of years, and we will not surrender it now to some cosmic bullies who think strength gives them the right to rule." His voice grew stronger with each word. "Leave our system now, or face the consequences." You know what's funny about bullies? They never expect the kid they're picking on to punch back. And Admiral Kraldok, standing on his bridge surrounded by the most advanced weapons in 3 galaxies, couldn't help but laugh at the sheer audacity of these primitive humans. His laughter echoed through the Dominator's bridge like the sound of breaking glass, each note dripping with the arrogance of someone who had never met a force he couldn't crush. "Consequences?" Kraldok wheezed, wiping tears from his 6 eyes. "From insects who barely crawl beyond their own moon. From a species that still burns dead plants for energy." He gestured to his weapons officer with one clawed appendage. "Vaporize their lunar mining station. Show them the price of defiance. Let them watch 3,000 of their kind become stardust." The weapons officer's hands moved across his console with practiced efficiency. The Dominator's primary plasma cannon began to charge, its crystalline core drawing power from the ship's quantum reactor. The weapon hummed with barely contained destruction, its purple energy building to a crescendo that would have made a supernova jealous. On Luna Base Alpha, Captain Diana Foster stood in the command center, watching the impossible unfold on her screens. At 35, she was the youngest base commander in the history of the lunar mining operations, a position she'd earned through 15 years of brutal work in the harshest environment humans had ever tried to call home. She'd survived solar flares, meteorite impacts, and equipment failures that would have killed lesser crews. But she'd never faced anything like this. "Captain," her communications officer called out, his voice barely steady. "We're detecting massive energy buildup from the alien flagship. They're targeting us." Foster looked around at her crewmen and women who had left everything behind to mine rare Earth elements in the lunar soil, who had families waiting for them back on Earth, who had never signed up to be the first casualties of an interstellar war. She opened the base-wide communication channel, her voice calm despite the terror clawing at her chest. "All hands, this is Captain Foster. We're about to be fired upon by hostile forces. I want you to know that serving with you has been the greatest honor of my life. If we don't make it through this, remember that we stood here not as conquerors, but as explorers. We came to the stars not to destroy, but to build." The plasma beam lanced across the void like a purple spear of concentrated death, traveling at the speed of light toward the small cluster of domes and mining equipment that represented humanity's first tentative steps into the larger universe. Foster closed her eyes, thinking of her daughter back in Houston, wondering if the 7-year-old would even remember her face. But death never came. The plasma beam struck something invisible, just meters from the base's outer hull, and scattered. Like raindrops hitting bulletproof glass, the energy that should have vaporized 3,000 human souls instead dissipated harmlessly into space, leaving behind only the faintest shimmer of disturbed light. "What the hell?" Foster breathed, her eyes snapping open to see her base still intact, her crew still alive, and something impossible happening on her sensors. Across the Vorthon fleet, emergency sirens began to wail. Not the gentle chimes of routine system checks, but the harsh, urgent blares that meant their most advanced sensors were detecting something that shouldn't exist. Admiral Kraldok's laughter died in his throat as his tactical display exploded with readings that made no sense. "What in the void is that?" he snarled, his 6 eyes fixed on energy signatures that were literally off the scale. Sensors were designed to detect power sources across entire star systems, but whatever was happening on Earth's southern continent was making them scream warnings like frightened children. The answer was coming from the bottom of the world, from a place so remote and hostile that even humans barely dared to venture there. Deep in Antarctica's frozen heart, something that had been waiting for 65 million years was finally stirring to life. Dr. Amanda Cole had been studying ice core samples at McMurdo Research Station for 3 years, searching for clues about McMurd, ancient climate patterns. She was used to surprises: prehistoric bacteria, volcanic ash from eruptions that predated human civilization, even fragments of meteors that had fallen during the age of dinosaurs. But nothing had prepared her for this. Through the station's reinforced windows, she watched the ice plain stretch endlessly toward the horizon. Then, as she watched, the ice began to crack. Not randomly, not chaotically, but in perfect geometric patterns that spoke of intelligence and purpose. Hexagonal shapes spread across the frozen landscape like a vast honeycomb, each one glowing with soft blue-white light that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of a heartbeat. "This is impossible," she whispered into her radio, her breath fogging. "The cold air of the research station? Control, are you seeing this? The energy readings are off every scale we have. The ice is ... It's moving in patterns. Perfect mathematical patterns." Her instruments, designed to measure geological activity and weather patterns, were going haywire. The electromagnetic readings showed power levels that shouldn't exist outside of a star's core. The seismic equipment was detecting vibrations that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, and deep beneath miles of ice. Something ancient and powerful was beginning to wake up. The geometric patterns of light were spreading faster now, covering thousands of square kilometers. In minutes. From orbit, it must have looked like the entire Antarctic continent was transforming into a circuit board of impossible complexity. And somewhere in those patterns, in those ancient designs carved into the very bedrock of the planet, lay the answer to humanity's salvation. The universe was about to learn that Earth had never been as defenseless as it appeared. Sometimes the greatest protection comes not from the weapons you can see, but from the Guardians who choose to remain hidden until the moment they're needed most. Speaking of hidden forces that compound over time into unstoppable power, check out my next video about the incredible power of compounding where small, consistent actions create massive results. Just like these ancient patterns that waited millions of years for the perfect moment to reveal their true strength. Have you ever watched ice cubes melt and wondered what would happen if physics suddenly decided to take a coffee break? Because that's exactly what Dr. Amanda Cole was witnessing from her research station window. The Antarctic ice wasn't just cracking, it was shattering into billions of crystal fragments that defied every law of nature she'd spent her career studying. The fragments didn't fall to the ground like any sensible piece of ice should. Instead, they floated in midair, spinning slowly like frozen dancers caught in an invisible ballet. Then, as Cole watched with her mouth hanging open, each fragment began to glow with an inner light that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the visible spectrum. The crystalline pieces started dissolving, not melting, but transforming into pure energy that crackled and sparked like captured lightning. "This is Cole at McMurdo," she stammered into her radio, her scientific training warring with the impossible. Evidence before her eyes. "I need to report. God, I don't even know what to call this. Okay, the ice is converting directly to energy. The molecular structure is. It's changing at the quantum level. But the real show was just beginning." From the depths of the newly opened chasms, structures began to rise that made humanity's greatest architectural achievements look like sandcastles. These weren't buildings in any sense that human minds could comprehend. They were spires of living light that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They twisted and curved through space in ways that hurt to look at directly, their surfaces reflecting not just light, but time itself. The spires pulsed with rhythms that seemed to match the heartbeat of the universe, each pulse sending waves of energy that rippled through the fabric of reality. Some appeared solid as diamond. Others flickered between states of matter, like they couldn't decide whether they wanted to be liquid, solid, or something entirely new. And all of them sang not with sound, but with harmonics that vibrated through the quantum foam itself, 300 miles above Earth's surface. Admiral Kraldock stood frozen on his bridge, watching his fleet's most advanced computers have what could only be described as a nervous breakdown. The Vorthan Empire's technology was legendary. They had conquered civilizations that had mastered time travel, defeated species that could manipulate matter at the molecular level, and absorb the knowledge of 1,000 worlds. But their sensors were screaming error messages at the incomprehensible structures rising from Antarctica. "Those aren't human constructs," Kraldox whispered, his voice thick with growing dread. His 6 eyes were locked on readings that made no sense. Energy signatures that predated not just human civilization, but the Vorthan Empire itself. The quantum resonance patterns. They're older than our entire species. It's older than our star system. His tactical officer, a veteran of 50 conquered worlds, was frantically checking and rechecking his instruments. "Admiral, the computers are estimating these structures are at least 65 million years old, but that's impossible. Earth was populated by primitive reptiles back then." Apparently, Kraldox muttered, "We were wrong about more than just Earth's defenses." Then came the moment that would change everything. From the largest of the crystalline spires, a figure began to emerge, not walking, not flying, but simply manifesting, as if reality itself was sculpting a new form from pure possibility. First Guardian stepped into the light of day for the first time in 65 million years. The being was 3 meters tall, its form seeming to be carved from crystallized starlight itself. Its body wasn't solid in any conventional sense. It appeared to be composed of living energy that held a shape through sheer force of will. Neural networks pulsed beneath its translucent skin, not with the electrical impulses of biological life, but with the rhythm of quantum mechanics itself. It was beautiful in a way that made humans weep, and terrifying in a way that made hardened warriors tremble. The Guardian had waited so long for this moment. Through the ice ages and the warming periods, through the rise and fall of countless species, through the slow dance of evolution that had eventually produced these remarkable creatures called humans. It had dreamed of this day when it would finally be needed again, back in NORAD's Cheyenne Mountain complex. Lieutenant Tommy Rodriguez was having what his grandmother would have called a holy cow moment. The 26-year-old radar specialist had been tracking everything from weather balloons to spy satellites for 3 years, but nothing had prepared him for this. His screens erupted with contact signatures that defied classification. Hundreds of them. All emerging from the Antarctic ice like flowers blooming in fast forward. "General Hayes," Rodriguez shouted, nearly dropping his coffee mug in his excitement. "We're reading hundreds of ... I don't know what to call them. They're definitely not human, but they're not hostile to us either. In fact, they're beautiful." The contacts weren't moving like any aircraft or spacecraft Rodriguez had ever tracked. They flowed across his screen like liquid light, their movements following patterns that seemed almost choreographed. And the energy readings? Sweet mother of pearl? The energy readings were off every scale they had. Then something incredible happened. The first Guardian's voice reached every mind on Earth and beyond, not through radio waves or sound, but through pure understanding that transcended language itself. It spoke directly to consciousness, bypassing the ears and speaking straight to the soul. "The children have grown strong," the voice said. Somehow every human on Earth understood it perfectly, regardless of what language they spoke. "The time of protection begins again." Those words carried with them a flood of knowledge, a downloading of understanding that revealed the most incredible truth in human history. These beings weren't invaders or conquerors, they were Earth's previous children, the intelligence that had ruled the planet before the great extinction event that ended the dinosaurs. They had chosen to sleep, to step back from the cosmic stage, and let evolution create worthy successors. They had been waiting for humanity to grow strong enough to inherit the stars. Across the frozen continent, hundreds more Guardians began to rise from their hidden cities. Each one was unique, their forms reflecting different aspects of the universe's fundamental forces. Some appeared to be made of living mathematics, their bodies composed of geometric patterns that shifted and flowed, like liquid equations. Others seemed to be carved from compressed space-time itself, their presence warping reality around them in subtle but profound ways. Captain Diana Foster's voice crackled over the come from Luna Bay's Alpha, her words carrying a mixture of awe and gratitude that every human could feel. "Command, whatever these beings are, they just saved our lives. The alien weapon couldn't penetrate their shields. We're alive because of them." The universe was about to learn that Earth had never been defenseless. It had always been protected by Guardians who understood that the greatest strength comes not from domination, but from knowing when to step back and let the next generation find their own path to greatness, just like these ancient Guardians who waited millions of years for the perfect moment to reveal their power. True strength often comes from patience and timing. Want to learn how small, consistent actions can compound into incredible results over time? Check out my next video about the amazing power of compounding where waiting for the right moment creates unstoppable momentum. You know that moment? In a movie when the villain realizes they've picked a fight with the wrong person, that exact moment was playing out on a cosmic scale as Admiral Kraldox frantically barked orders to his fleet. The Vorthan Armada, which had conquered 3 galaxies and crushed 1,000 civilizations, was now trying to do something they'd never had to do before: run away. "Full retreat," Kraldox roared, his 6 eyes wild with panic. "Jump to hyperspace. Get us out of this cursed system." But here's where things got really interesting. The Vorthan ships fired up their quantum drives, the same technology that had allowed them to cross interstellar distances in the blink of an eye. Their engines screamed to life. Reality began to bend around their holes. And then, nothing. They were still there, trapped in Earth's orbit like insects in amber. Space itself had become their prison. The Guardians' technology operated on principles that made faster-than-light travel look like a child's tricycle compared to a rocket ship. They weren't just manipulating energy or matter, they were reshaping the fundamental forces that held reality together. Physics wasn't just being bent, it was being rewritten on the fly. The Dominator's chief engineer, a being who had spent centuries mastering the most advanced propulsion systems in known space, stared at his instruments in disbelief. "Admiral, the quantum fields they're solid. Space-time itself has become impermeable. It's like trying to drive through concrete. Kraldox felt something he hadn't experienced in over 200 years of conquest. Genuine fear. Not the tactical concern of a difficult battle, but the primal terror of realizing you're no longer the apex predator in the room. Then the impossible happened, something that violated every law of physics, every rule of warfare, every assumption about how the universe worked. A guardian simply appeared on his bridge, not beamed aboard, not teleported, not transported by any technology the Vorthins could comprehend. One moment the bridge was empty except for his crew, the next moment there was a being of impossible beauty and terrible power standing in the center of the command deck. The Guardian's form shifted between solid matter and pure energy, like watching lightning learn to walk upright. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of geological ages, of mountain ranges rising and falling, of stars being born and dying in the endless dance of cosmic time. You threatened our inheritors, you mocked their defenses, you believed them helpless. The words hit Kraldox like physical blows. This being wasn't just ancient, it was primordial, older than the Vorthan Empire, older than their home star, older than most of the galaxies they'd conquered. His warrior's pride, forged in 1,000 battles, crumbled like paper in a hurricane. What manner of being are you? Kraldox stammered, his voice barely a whisper.
Ow.
For the first time in his long life, he felt small. Small, but cosmically insignificant, mayfly, trying to comprehend the ocean. The Guardian's form blazed brighter, its energy patterns shifting into configurations that hurt to look at directly. We are what remains of Earth's first children, it replied, each word resonating through dimensions the Vorthins couldn't even perceive. We guided evolution itself to create worthy successors. Humanity is under our protection. They always have been. Think about that for a moment. While the Vorthins were conquering primitive worlds and bullying lesser species, these Guardians had been playing a game on a completely different level. They weren't just protecting a planet, they were nurturing the development of an entire species across millions of years, guiding evolution itself to produce beings worthy of inheriting the stars. The Guardian gestured with one limb that seemed to be made of crystallized space-time, and suddenly the entire Vorthan fleet found themselves trapped in a cage of folded reality. It wasn't a force field or energy barrier, it was space itself, twisted and knotted into an unbreakable prison. The ships could move within their confined space, but they couldn't escape any more than a fish could escape water by swimming faster. Your empire expands through fear and conquest, the Guardian continued, its voice now carrying notes of cosmic disappointment. You prey on the weak, the unprepared, the isolated. But Earth has never been undefended. Then came the revelation that would shatter everything Kraldox thought he knew about the universe. Images flooded his mind, not through any communication device, but directly into his consciousness. The true history of Earth's past visitations played out in his thoughts like a movie he couldn't turn off. Every aggressive species that had ever approached the blue world had encountered the Guardian's subtle interventions. Not the dramatic displays of power they were witnessing now, but quiet, almost gentle redirections that had protected humanity without humans ever knowing they needed protection. Exploration probes, mysteriously misdirected by quantum anomalies. Invasion fleets that somehow got lost in spatial distortions and never found their way back. Would-be conquerors who simply forgot that Earth existed, their memories quietly edited by beings who understood consciousness itself. The images kept coming. The Xanthari Collective, a hive mind that had consumed 17 star systems, had launched a scouting mission to Earth in 1947. They'd never returned. And eventually the collective had simply forgotten they'd ever sent them. The Nexus Warriors, cybernetic beings who had mechanized entire galaxies, detected Earth's radio signals in 1977 and begun preparing an assimilation fleet. Somehow, their navigation computers had developed permanent errors, and they'd ended up in a completely different spiral arm of the galaxy. It was like discovering that your quiet, unassuming neighbor had been secretly fighting off burglars for decades without you ever knowing you were in danger. Back on Earth, Major Lisa Carter stood in the Pentagon's war room. watching something that defied every principle of military strategy she'd ever learned. The alien fleet wasn't being destroyed in any conventional sense. No explosions, no weapons fire, no dramatic battle sequences. Instead, they were simply ... fading. "They're not being destroyed," she reported into her headset, her voice filled with awe. "They're being erased from existence itself. The ships are becoming transparent, like they're being removed from reality." The process was beautiful in its terrifying elegance. The Vorthan vessels weren't exploding or breaking apart. They were simply becoming less real with each passing moment. Their quantum signatures were being systematically deleted from the universal database, their existence being gently but irrevocably revoked. It was the most profound display of power the universe had ever witnessed, the ability to make something unhappen, to edit reality itself and remove unwanted elements from the cosmic story. The Guardians weren't just protecting Earth, they were curating the universe, ensuring that only those species worthy of joining the galactic community would ever find their way to humanity's door. And as the last of the Vorthan fleet faded from existence, leaving only empty space and the faintest echo of what had once been a mighty armada, the Guardian turned its attention back to the task it had been preparing for across geological ages, helping humanity take its first steps into a larger universe. The universe was about to learn that true power isn't about domination. It's about knowing when to act and when to wait, when to reveal strength and when to remain hidden. Just like these ancient guardians who waited millions of years for the perfect moment to protect their chosen successors. The greatest results often come from patient, strategic action that compounds over time. Want to learn how small, consistent choices can create unstoppable momentum in your own life? Check out my next video about the incredible power of compounding, where timing and patience create extraordinary results. Have you ever witnessed a magic trick so perfect that reality itself seemed to applaud? That's exactly what happened, as the Vorthan fleet simply ... disappeared, not destroyed, not defeated, but erased from existence as if the universe had hit a cosmic delete button. One moment Earth's sky was filled with crystalline warships that had terrorized 3 galaxies, and the next moment there was nothing but empty space and the gentle twinkle of distant stars. The erasure was so complete, so absolute, that it went beyond mere destruction. In the Vorthan home system, millions of light years away, something extraordinary was happening. Every computer database, every historical record, every mention of Earth's location was being mysteriously corrupted. Navigation charts developed permanent errors. Stellar cartography systems experienced spontaneous memory failures. It was as if the universe itself was conspiring to make Earth invisible to those who would do it harm. The Guardians had made their decision. Humanity needed more time to develop naturally before joining the galactic community. But that didn't mean leaving them defenseless. It meant becoming the invisible shield that would protect them until they were ready to protect themselves. President Marcus Thompson stood at the edge of the McMurdo research station, his breath forming clouds in the Antarctic air as he watched, something that no human leader had ever witnessed before. The impossible geometries of the Guardian cities were slowly sinking back beneath the ice, their crystalline spires folding through dimensions that human mathematics couldn't even describe. The sight was both beautiful and heartbreaking, like watching angels return to heaven after walking among mortals. He had been chosen as humanity's first contact, the only human leader to know the truth about Earth's ancient protectors. The weight of that knowledge sat heavy on his shoulders. How do you lead a species when you know they've been secretly protected for their entire existence? How do you maintain the illusion of independence when you've seen the invisible hand that guides your fate? Will you stay hidden forever? Thompson asked the Guardian beside him, his form shimmering between solid matter and pure energy in the Antarctic sunlight. The Guardian's response carried the patience of geological ages, the wisdom of beings who had watched stars be born and die. Until humanity no longer needs protection, it replied, its voice like wind through crystal caves. Until they can stand among the stars as equals, not as prey. We have waited 65 million years. We can wait a little longer. But here's the thing about waiting that long. You learn to think in terms of investment rather than immediate returns. As the last Guardian city disappeared beneath the ice, it left behind something precious, a gift that would change everything. While appearing to change nothing at all, the enhancements were subtle, almost imperceptible. Dr. Amanda Cole, who had been studying ice cores just days before, suddenly found herself with inexplicable knowledge of quantum physics. Complex equations that should have taken decades to understand flowed through her mind like remembered poetry. She would publish papers that would revolutionize energy production. Everyone would assume she was simply a brilliant scientist, having breakthrough moments. Captain Diana Foster, still recovering from her near-death experience on Luna Base. Alpha discovered that her engineering team suddenly understood fusion power in ways that textbooks couldn't explain. They would build reactors that would power humanity's expansion into the solar system. Historians would credit human ingenuity for the breakthrough. Nobody would ever know that the knowledge had been quietly downloaded from beings who had mastered these technologies before Earth's sun had finished forming. Major Lisa Carter, watching from the Pentagon's war room, found that her tactical computers had gained processing speed that defied every known law of semiconductor physics. The Pentagon would classify the advancement as a breakthrough in quantum computing, never realizing that the processors were now operating on principles that wouldn't be discovered by human science for another century. This was the Guardians' masterpiece, not just protecting humanity, but preparing them for greatness. They were giving their chosen successors the tools they would need to reach for the stars with stronger hands, better prepared for what waited in the darkness between worlds. And what about the Vorthan Empire? They never learned what happened to their missing fleet. In their records, the ships had simply vanished during a routine patrol, lost to some unexplained spatial anomaly. The admiral who had ordered the attack on Earth was found in his quarters one morning with no memory of the past week, his mind gently edited to remove any knowledge of humanity's existence. But across the galaxy, other aggressive species began to receive a very different message. It came not through traditional communication channels, refined, but through quantum-entangled dreams that reached into the deepest levels of consciousness. The message was simple and terrifying. Earth was protected by something far older and more terrible than they could imagine. The Kroner Dominion, a species that had been planning to harvest Earth's oceans, suddenly found their military leaders having nightmares about crystalline beings that could unmake reality itself. The hegemony of worlds, which had been preparing. Invasion fleets for 3 promising systems, including Earth, discovered that their navigational computers had developed permanent errors. Whenever they tried to plot courses toward the 3rd planet of a yellow star, word spread through the galactic underworld like wildfire. There was a blue world that was absolutely, permanently off-limits. Nobody talked about why. Nobody could explain the source of the prohibition. But every pirate, every conqueror, every species with aggressive intentions learned to give that particular sector of space a very wide berth. In the depths of Antarctica, Guardians returned to their slumber. But this time, they slept lightly like parents who had put their children to bed but kept one ear open for any sound of trouble. They were ready to wake at the first sign of threat to their chosen successors, ready to defend the species they had nurtured across millions of years of evolution. Humanity would inherit the stars. But they would never inherit them alone. They would have guardians watching over them, invisible protectors who understood that the greatest strength comes not from domination, but from knowing when to act and when to wait patiently in the shadows. The last guardian's final thought before returning to dormancy was one of pure pride. Their children had grown strong, had shown courage in the face of impossible odds, had proven themselves worthy of the protection they had always received. Soon, perhaps within a few centuries, barely a heartbeat in guardian time, they would be ready to know the truth about their ancient protectors. And when that day came, humanity would join the galactic community, not as conquered subjects or protected children, but as equals who had earned their place among the stars through courage, determination, and the wisdom to know that true strength comes from patience and preparation. Just like these ancient guardians who invested millions of years in humanity's development, the greatest results in life come from consistent, patient effort that compounds over time. Want to learn how small, strategic actions can create extraordinary outcomes in your own life? Check out my next video about the incredible power of compounding, where patience and persistence create unstoppable momentum that transforms ordinary people into extraordinary achievers. The end.